The last two sessions were on indifference curve analysis. The first part, we examined the assumptions of indifference curve and the properties of indifference curve and ended with the indifference map. The second session was on the price line and budget line and how consumers reach equilibrium. Now, here we are looking into the price effect, which is composed of income effect and substitution effect. So I hope you have been finding these sessions useful to you, and the notes are also useful for your reference part of it. Please share the video with your friends and also click the subscribe button. So thank you, and let me start my work. So here we are looking into indifference curve analysis, where we are talking about the income effect, substitution effect, and totally the price effect. Now, what do we understand by income effect? When the money income changes of the consumer, it is obvious with both the prices of both the goods remaining the same, that the consumer will be able to buy more of goods, and naturally he will go to a higher indifference curve than before. Now, this will alter the equilibrium position of the consumer, and with relative prices remaining the same, only income changes. So the budget line will move to the right. Now we can see how we can understand this budget moving to the right. Can you imagine how the budget line will move to the right? Right? So the consumer can buy more of both commodities. Now, when we are talking about the budget line moving to the right, we will now introduce two ideas here. In terms of inferior goods, how will the consumer respond? And in terms of both being normal goods, how will the consumer respond to an increase in income? So first, let us see what happens when the consumer's income rises, and if both the goods are normal goods, X and Y both are normal goods, it is very obvious, the logic is very obvious, that the consumer will buy more of both goods A and B, and the consumer will move to the higher indifference curve. Now, when we connect these points of equilibrium for the consumer, we reach what is called the income consumption curve. I'm sure that having done so many diagrams in indifference curve, you are now able to draw this curve on your own. What would that mean? There is an original price budget line. The income of the consumer has moved, therefore it moves to the right. If it moves to the right, the consumer will also buy more of goods, and therefore if we get a higher indifference curve, and thereafter another higher indifference curve, and so on. So when we connect these points of equilibrium, we get what is known as the income consumption curve. I'm sure you could draw it on your own. Nevertheless, let me show you how it is done. So that's normal goods. Both X and Y are normal goods. You can see each time the budget line has moved to the right, and you also see that the consumer has got new points of equilibrium or using the indifference curve, which connected gives what is called as the income consumption curve. So now I shall pose a question to you. What if we introduce X as an inferior good or Y as an inferior good? How will the consumer indifference curve and the points of equilibrium look like? Can you try drawing that? Let me first give a situation where commodity Y is an inferior good. Consumer good Y is inferior. what kind of an indifference curve, the income consumption curve will you get because of that? Right? And I hope you have understood the logic of it, and therefore drawing this new curve is not difficult. So let's see how it looks like. When Y is an inferior good, you find that the consumer is buying less and less of commodity Y and purchasing more of commodity X because he can afford to buy something better, and he can naturally reduce the consumption of something of an inferior good, which was commodity Y. In which case, the income consumption curve will move to the right, indicating that Y is an inferior good and X is a normal good. Now, the same argument you can put for X as an inferior good. Between X and Y, X as an inferior good. I'm sure that this diagram you can draw it on your own. Certainly, you can draw this diagram on your own. Right? Now, this is how the curve will look like. It becomes a backward sloping income consumption curve because the consumer buys less and less of commodity X, and he would rather buy more and more of commodity Y because X is an inferior good, and the consumer rather spend his money on buying something which is a normal good and cut down his expenditure on the inferior good if his income has increased. I hope all the three diagrams are very clear to you. They're very simple. If you understood the logic, it's very simple. Now, we have another problem here. When there is a change in the income of the consumer, we had one kind of an effect. What happens when the price of the commodity itself changes? That means commodity X changes or the price of commodity Y changes. When the price of commodity X and Y changes, you will get a different set of diagrams and a different kind of an argument. Now, let me put this way. Suppose the price of X falls with Y remaining the same. What is it? The price of commodity X falls and the price of Y remains the same. What will this consumer do? And why will he do what he does? When the price of commodity X falls, the consumer's purchasing power of the income, that is a real income, will actually increase. Because on what he was spending 10 rupees, now he may spend 5 rupees, which means his purchasing power in terms of that commodity has increased. We need to know when the price of commodity X has fallen, what will the consumer do regarding the purchase of commodity X and commodity Y? Mind you, the price of Y has remained the same, only the price of X has fallen. So we want to know, how will this consumer alter, if at all, will he alter the quantity purchased of commodity X and commodity Y? When we do that, we are entering into something called as the substitution effect. We want to know whether the consumer will substitute Y for X because X has become cheaper. To do this, we have another concept called the compensatory variation in money income. Now, what do we mean by compensatory variation in money income? So what we will do is, we will withdraw that extra money income that has come to him because of a fall in the prices. So here what we will do, I told you that instead of rupees 10, he needs to pay rupees 5, and he now get extra amount of X because his real income in terms of good X has increased. So that extra income that he got in terms of fall in price, we will have to withdraw that price. How shall we withdraw the price? Now, though we can't impose a tax on him, let us assume that there is a tax that is put on him. Now, the tax amount should be equal to the extra real income that he got, which means the extra purchasing power that he got because of a fall in the price, that extra income must be taken away from the consumer, and the consumer should be brought back to the same indifference curve. Otherwise, what is the consumer likely to do? He will go to a new indifference curve, isn't it? We have done in the last lesson, we had done what is price, how the price lines move. So here now, the fall in the price of commodity X allows the consumer to purchase more of commodity X. So, to understand whether he will compensate, whether he will substitute commodity Y for by X, we want to find out that. For this, now we shall reduce, or we shall withdraw a certain amount of income from him. What is that certain amount? That certain amount is the extra income that he got because of a fall in the price. So what shall we do here now? We have another heuristic way of looking at it. So what we do now is we shall introduce a new budget line. And this hypothetical budget line will bring the consumer back to the original indifference curve, but the equilibrium will be at a new point. Let us see how we can explain this. So I'll show the diagram first, then I can come back to this. Now you can see the diagram. The original price line is PL. The original price line is PL, which is a green line, and the price of commodity X has fallen, which makes the consumer to go to the new price line PL1, right? So when it has gone to PL1, the consumer from the green point of equilibrium point E will now go to the new equilibrium point R. R is on the IC2. Am I getting clear now? So PL is the original price line. Price of commodity X has fallen. Because of that, it has gone to become PL1. On PL, the first curve, the consumer is at equilibrium at point E, and he is buying OX unit of commodity X. Next, the price of X has fallen. The consumer has got a new price line, PL1, and the consumer will go to a new indifference curve, IC2, at point equilibrium at point R. So these two positions are clear. So the consumer will automatically go to the point X2 because he will be at a different point of equilibrium. Now, let me introduce this hypothetical budget line. What is this hypothetical budget line? Where I'm going to withdraw the increased purchasing power that the consumer got, LL1. That extra purchasing power that he has got, we will take it away from him. So when we take it away from him, we have to draw a hypothetical budget line. Where is this hypothetical budget line? This hypothetical budget line is drawn in such a way that it is tangent to the first indifference curve, not at the original point of equilibrium at E, but at a new equilibrium point at point F. This red budget line RL will also indicate that it is parallel to the original budget line to the new budget line PL1. So the consumer, we have taken away extra income from him. We have brought him back to the same indifference curve. We have used this new budget line to do that. The new budget line, the red line, is at equilibrium with the consumer's indifference curve at point F. Now, by doing this, the consumer is able to purchase only OX1 unit of commodity X instead of OX2 units of commodity X. So let me just go back for the notes purposes. Let me just take you back to that. So original price line is PL. Consumer's equilibrium is on L1 at quantity X, at L at quantity X. Fall in price makes the new price line PL1. Possible new quantity of equilibrium is X2. Then we are having a compensating variation curve in that introduced, which is the RS. And then that extra income is withdrawn for the consumer, which is wiped out, which the consumer, it becomes SL1. That's a new budget line which is parallel, and therefore the consumer will reach at the point of equilibrium on the first indifference curve, but with a lesser quantity at x1 at point F. I hope it is clear for your notes purpose also. And this is how the consumer will be. So now we have found three different points of equilibrium, E, F, and R. And this points of equilibrium show OX quantity in the original position, OX2 quantity in the new price line, and OX1 quantity when we have taken away that extra income and we found that he can't buy as much as before, but he has purchased more of X than more of Y, because the price of X has fallen. So now let's see what happens. Now this price effect is composed of two effects. What is the two effect here? The first effect is called X to X1. When the consumer moved from X to X1, we call it the substitution effect. And X1 to X2 is called the income effect. So you can just see the diagram again. You see here, the movement from X to X1 is the substitution effect. Because of a change in price, the consumer of price of commodity X, the consumer moved from X to X1. So he's substituting some amount of Y with some amount of X because X has become cheaper. And at the same time, the consumer can buy more up to X1, X2 because of an increase in income. So X to X1 is called as substitution effect, and X1 to X2 is known as income effect. So price effect can be broken down into two effects. One is called the income effect and the other one is called the substitution effect. Income effect is seeing how much extra income the consumer will get because of the price, and because of that how much the consumer can buy extra. And the other one we are only talking about because of the fall in the price of X, how much more units of commodity X a consumer will buy. So X to X1 is substitution effect, X1 to X2 is known as income effect, and X1 plus X1 X2 is known as total price effect. Yes, so thus price effect is the total of substitution effect and the price effect. It is quite understood naturally, because if the income of the consumer increases, he will buy more of that commodity. But that when he buys more of the commodity, he may have actually reduced some units of commodity. Why? That is what we are trying to say. How much is because of the fall in the price of X and how much is because of the increase in income with relationship to Y. So with X, that is what we need to do. So we introduce the hypothetical line and we found equilibrium positions are different. So I hope you have understood this concept, the three concepts of price effect, income effect, and substitution effect. All the three will tell us how consumer can actually alter his quantity purchase because of a fall in the price of the commodity in question. And when the price commodity falls, there are two effects. His income will increase, and also he will substitute a part of the purchases of commodity Y by commodity X. So these were the three big lessons of indifference curve analysis. And I'm sure that if you have understood this much of it, and if you continue to use it along with your reading material, you will understand the subject very well. Let me see whether this indifference curve has got practical applications in life, because we have spent so much time studying something which is quite of this nature. But also we find that it has got a lot of application in real life, and this allows us to think in that way. It allows to think that the consumer is buying something, he's on an equilibrium position, he's altering his equilibrium position, then he's changing the consumption from one commodity to the other, or he is substituting one for the other. There are a lot of ideas that have come, and these ideas are useful when we try to see whether it can be applied in real life. Let us see some examples where it is applied in real life. First one is a concept called Edgeworth box diagram, FY Edgeworth box diagram. This diagram is useful in trade when two parties or two countries are trading with each other. Then where do they come to a position of equilibrium in terms of exchange is explained with the help of Edgeworth box diagram. You will find the utility of this Edgeworth box diagram when you do international trade. Also in terms of environmental economics, also you can find the applications of this. It is used in the ration, when ration has to be exchanged between somebody who uses wheat and somebody who uses rice, and how can we allow them to exchange rice for wheat. That's also done with the help of this indifference curve, Edgeworth box diagram. I'm not going to explain that in detail here. Even government policies, if the government is giving subsidies, let us say the government gives subsidies for electricity and water, or for education and health. Now, these are two commodities that the consumer will be given by the government as subsidy, and the government wants to know which one to be increased more or which one to be increased less. In that case, also this indifference idea will work. We can put them on two axes and use all the ideas that you have used here and see how the consumer will actually move from electricity to more water, or from education to more health. If we put on the vertical axis education, and on the horizontal axis if we put health, how will the consumer move if the price of health reduces, and so on. It can also help to understand between work and leisure. If I put the index of work and leisure, then I can also understand if the leisure has got more value, how would I compensate work, how I would substitute work for leisure. If my income is good enough, how would I have substituted work with leisure, or if it was the other way, that I needed more work, how I would have compensated work with less leisure. So this kind of a substitution can be understood in terms of work leisure. It can also be done to understand the various tax policies the government does in terms of direct and indirect taxes, and see which one is preferred by the consumers and how it can be done by the government. So these are some of the practical applications. There are many more practical applications to that, but I just highlighted 3 or 4 of them. But you can understand that this idea, though appeared to be very abstract in the beginning, but now you can understand in real life how we are actually substituting one for the other, how price falls, our income increases. When income increases, how do we rearrange our purchases? And at the end of the day, the consumer is trying to reach a position of equilibrium with the income that he has got and the indifference curve that he has, and he wants to decide how much of both the goods that the consumer can buy. So let me come to the last part of the session. How do you think indifference can be used to explain families' expenditure? What would you like to put on the vertical axis and on the horizontal axis, and try and see if the one that you put on the vertical or horizontal axis, if that price falls, how will the family keep adjusting to that new change? How will the consumer, the family as a consumer, do it? Or if you were instead of the family, if you were the individual consumer who experienced a fall in the price of something that you had on the vertical axis or on the horizontal axis, how would you reallocate your expenditure and yet try to come to an equilibrium position? And also, how can you understand how people trade off their work and leisure? What will be the considerations they have when they have to trade off work and leisure? Will it be different for men and women? How will women work when they have to trade off with leisure? How will men work with trade off with leisure? And how will the indifference curve position itself? What will be the quantity of leisure? What will be the quantity of work? So you can see that this idea can be put to practical application. It just needs that you have logically followed the sequence of arguments that we had. And I'm sure that you could draw some of the diagrams yourself. And therefore, indifference curve is not really a very abstract idea. It is just that you need to understand the logic behind that development. So thank you very much. Before you sign off, please click the subscribe button, and also share this video with your friends. And your comments are very valuable to me because I could use them for developing topics for you further. The next session will be on the law of demand. So, law of demand itself, I will have two sessions. First, I will have the law of demand, and then I will have shifts in the shift and movements of the demand curve. Thank you very much.